Hey folks, it's been a while since I've done a channel update, so I'm going to spend some time updating you on what's been happening in my life over the last 4 months. It's been very eventful. The first thing is on the 9th of May, I wrote a badge post because I decided to leave my job at Meta as Director of Organizational Effectiveness, and I will read that post in another video. And then I also chose to start full time focusing on building businesses to help Africa to leapfrog through technology by 2050. So I'm going to share with you a few updates on those businesses. And then finally, there's some personal things that happened in my life, some very good, some very challenging, that have left me even more resolved to do more with the time that I have. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that as well. So, okay, without further ado, let's get started. So, some of you know that for some time I've been talking about the different things that I've been up to, and you've seen, for example, that I've pivoted the channel to focus a lot more on the Taylor Tax show, and that's been the main thing that I've been posting in the channel. So I haven't been posting about parenting tips or health tips or real estate tips. That, of course, doesn't mean that I haven't been doing those activities, but I just felt that I wanted to give Taylor Tax, which was my side hustle when I was still at Meta, an opportunity to grow. And now that since I've left Meta, Taylor Tax is one of three things that I'm focused on. I'm having my Elon Musk moment. So if Elon can work on three things at once, why can't I, right? And I've had some friends, such as my physio, Aaron, who've told me, like, dude, you're not Elon, so focus on one thing at a time. But hey, you only live once. Okay, so in all seriousness, folks, left Meta on the 17th of May, started full time as in Taylor Tax, also launched the African Institute of Future Technologies. And the African Institute of Future Technologies is an idea whose time I believe has come. The vision and mission of the African Institute of Future Technologies is to develop 1 billion tech entrepreneurs for Africa who learn, apply, and monetize the latest technology, starting with AI. And in doing so, they will transform their lives and they will help the continent to leapfrog by 2050. So I co-founded this institute and asked Greg Sarandos to join me in co-founding it, and he accepted. So Greg and I are working to get the AIFT off the ground. Initially, when I had the idea, or when the idea actually was being channeled to me, because I really feel very strongly that this idea is an idea that I've been receiving for at least over a year before I finally did it, right? So I would write down these ideas as they came to me. I call them streaming from the universal creative mind. Write it in my Google Keep notes, so I have like a ton of notes, and maybe one of these days I'll share those as a video or as a blog post. But anyway, coming back to the story, so Greg and I have decided to spend time together to launch the African Institute of Future Technologies, and we're creating a bunch of courses around AI and how African entrepreneurs can learn AI. Right, so that would be the first thing. And we thought initially that it would take about a year to launch the African Institute of Future Technologies. But since leaving Meta, I've spent so much time going back and forth to the continent of Africa, because there's been so much interest from different institutions and different individuals who want to hear more, who want to explore how we could potentially partner. So I'm at this stage feeling very positive and optimistic that we can launch the African Institute of Technologies before June 2025. I even think the best case scenario, we can launch this by January 2025. The other thing about the African Institute of Future Technologies is once I shared the idea broadly, I have so many good friends and colleagues at Meta who have been so generous with suggestions, their network, people I should talk to. And shout out to John Storm and shout out to Colin Sewell as well for their help in making some really good connections on the continent of Africa. We're in the process of formalizing some really, really good strategic partnerships thanks to their relationships and them opening up their network. So that's the AIFT. And The second thing is Greg had already started the African Academy of Artificial Intelligence. So that's about a year old. And the more we began having conversations about the AIFT, the more I learned about what we call triple AI. And so finally, Winnie and I decided to invest in triple AI, and we bought a pretty sizable equity stake. And Greg offered me the opportunity to play the role of executive chair of triple AI, and I've accepted that. And triple AI's mission vision is to help institutions to integrate AI into their strategy, into their operations, and into their products. And it has a three-pronged product strategy, let's say. So the first product is education. So these are courses, these are master classes, or going back to my South African pronunciation, master classes, and also keynote speeches, panel conversations at conferences, which actually is a very hot area right now. So the topic of AI, as you can imagine, is on everyone's top list in business, especially, but even in the business schools. So AAAI continues to receive invitations to speak at many conferences, and right now I have a calendar that even goes out all the way to February 2025 in terms of invites to speak as keynote speakers or participate in panels on behalf of AAAI to talk about AI and Africa. So that's another aspect of the education. And then the second leg is consulting. So spending time with companies to help them to think about how do they integrate AI into their governance, into their risk, into their compliance, spending time with them to help them think about how do they integrate AI into their strategy, their ops, their products. And speaking of products, the third part is the build. So the build is how we help companies to create bespoke AI solutions. And right now, one of the areas I'm really super excited about is we're looking at creating a AI hub for HR. And we have clients in South Africa who have expressed interest in having something like this that would help them to do things like create a talent marketplace for those who are in the HR community. You know that you know what that buzzword is all about. Looking at things that like talent management, succession planning, creating career paths using AI and customized career paths, dynamic career paths, looking at things like creating the job architecture as well as the skills development framework and creating these to be quite dynamic. And then another area that's quite interesting is using AI for wellness and helping to identify people who might be at risk of burnout, helping to make sure that companies don't suffer regrettable attrition, right? And then last but not least, also helping companies to figure out which managers are doing the things the way that the company wants them to retain people, right? So all bad bosses out there, just putting you on notice that soon AI will be able to give companies some data and metrics to let them know whether you're actually doing the things that the company needs you to do or if you're doing things that the company really doesn't want you to do. So it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek statement, but it is something that is helpful for companies to know which managers are actually developing people and which managers might be standing in the way of people developing. So that's triple AI, and Greg and I have decided that, yep, I'll play the role of executive chair and play the role of leading our efforts to develop this AI hub for HR. So super excited about that. And I've already started reaching out to some of our strategic partners in South Africa. Shout out to Natalie Maroon and the Performance Agency. Fantastic company that we have a strategic partnership with. So we'll be talking to them about the change management aspect of the AI builds that we'll be doing. So that's triple AI. And then coming back to Taylor Tax. So Taylor Tax, Big Al and I have been very busy making sure that we're growing the business. So we have more clients that have joined us. We also have continued to do our Taylor Tax podcast, which we call the Taylor Tax Show. And we're up to episode 24 that we've recorded. And I think tomorrow we'll be releasing the third part of our taxes and estate planning series, or tax lessons from estate planning series. And we'll be looking at what Heath Ledger estate, uh, the mistakes he made with his estate, the lessons that they can teach us, as well as the things that he did well and the lessons that they can teach us. So Taylor Tax continues to grow. We've also established really key strategic relationships and partnerships to help our clients to use the tax code more strategically. And the more we work on the taxes of our clients and the more we look to help them to solve some of the challenges that they're experiencing where good tax planning could help, the more we realize how strategic insurance is. And so I have an idea that I'm developing, incubating around creating the stories to show how people have solved their financial and non-financial challenges using a very well-structured life insurance policy. So that's Taylor Tax, and that's a high-level view of the three businesses that I'm working on during my Elon moment. And my idea is to use the time that I do have left here on this earth to, and you see why I'm saying that in a minute, left here on this earth to make sure that I continue to build these institutions that would help to provide people of African descent, Africans, and people all over the world really who want and need this to experience lives with the deepest dignity and to have and experience the highest well-being. So I have a bunch of different companies and ideas that I have, and I want to work in 3-year cycles to create these companies as institutions, set them up well, and then move on to creating the next one with minimal time invested in building the institutions. So okay, that's a little bit on the professional front. So let's come to the personal front and what's been going on. So lots of major things and changes. So leaving full-time employment to become an entrepreneur, that's been huge. Continuing the journey of investing in real estate, that continues to be huge. And Winnie and I bought another property in South Africa, and it took a lot longer than it should have for us to close on that property. So it actually took close to 4 months, and that partly impacted my ability also to do this update. Okay, and then also my 16-year-old daughter Claudina is now licensed to drive, and she's driving and enjoying that freedom, and I'm really proud of her. It was a pleasure and a privilege to be there with her, helping her to learn how to drive. Won't lie, there were some nerve-wracking moments, right, when you're teaching your teenager how to drive, but I just kept in mind that when my late dad, was teaching me how to drive, what I really appreciated was how calm he stayed, even when I made mistakes and errors. So I tried to do the same for Claudina, and I was able to do that. So I'm very happy for her. And that also frees me up because now she has the car. She can drive around. She can drive her brother, Gilbert, to practice. And she could also go shopping when she needs to and go grocery shopping on behalf of the family. And of course, she enjoys that freedom, and she can now drive to Auntie Jane. So shout out to Auntie Jane also. Okay, so that's on Claudina. Gilby continues to do well. He's now 14, and I'm just so pleased that we have this opportunity to be living in the same house because, as some of you may know, for 5 years, when I came back to the U.S., I was separated from my family because the green card process for my wife was just so frustrating, and it took so long, and I had to even get my senator and my representative, involved in that process to be able to get the green card from my wife. But anyway, so it's a pleasure to be able to be with my son at this critical stage. As a male, I have a philosophy that as boys, when we're growing up, we need male role models around us. We need to see examples of what it is like to develop into a man. So I'm glad that he has me directly with him and able to observe me, and his uncles like Uncle Daniel. So shout out to Uncle D as well. Uncle Baki, shout out to Uncle Baki as well. And so those role models are pretty critical. He's playing sports. He's doing well academically, as is Claudina. So kids continue to do well. And um, I had a, so this is part of why I was saying like the time that I have left. I had a diagnosis after seeing my physician, shout out to Dr. Isaac, my primary care physician, that everything looked really good. So my numbers were trending all in the right direction, cholesterol, blood sugar in terms of diabetes and those types of things, all looking really positive, liver function, all those things looking positive. But there was a slight concern because my PSA, prostate antigen scores were rising. And she wanted me to go see a specialist, a urologist, to just rule out that we had anything to be concerned about. So it took some time to schedule, but right around the time that I was leaving Meta, I finally was able to get an appointment. So early June, I go see the urologist, and he tells me that based on the PSA test scores, he had some concerns. So he, of course, he also did some tests to check whether my bladder, for example, was emptying completely. And there's this questionnaire that those men who have been through to a urologist, for example, would know, like where you have to fill out like how often do you find yourself needing to go pee, and like the quality and quantity. Anyway, I don't want to bore you with all those details. To make a long story short, turns out that he was concerned based on the PSA score, and then also he had me do, or I think Dr. Isaac may have had me do another test to actually gauge the percentage of free PSA. So I'm not a urologist, but I learned enough in this process to know why he was concerned. So his concern was your PSA is high. It's gone from 1 to like 5.23, and over the past 2 years, it's doubled twice, according to what the scores show. And then also the percentage of free PSA is at 10, and it should be at 20, for example. So he says, kind of casually for my liking, I think there's a 50 to 60% chance that you have prostate cancer. And my concern would be, if that's true, that it may have already metastasized, meaning it may have already spread. And for those who track the stages of cancer, that would imply that it's a stage 4 cancer. So that took me for a loop, that threw me off balance. I was kind of floored by that, thinking to myself, how is this possible that I could have prostate cancer? And if so, that it would be so advanced. Like everything else was looking good on my medical checkup. So very confusing. But from confused, I went to infuriated. And why was I so furious with this urologist, this specialist? Because he wanted me to do a biopsy. And when I read his own brochure that he gave me about the biopsy, I realized that the consequences of the biopsy seemed to be quite serious, and I would say permanent. Whereas he was not 100% sure that I had prostate cancer, because he did say 50 to 60% chance. He didn't spend time up front talking to me about what the other possibilities could have been. He seemed, and it felt to me like he was trying to move me very swiftly towards a biopsy, which I wasn't having none of once I read what the biopsy would result in. So I wanted no parts of the side effects of the biopsy. And I asked him a few questions just to try to better understand, like, okay, so if I have prostate cancer, then shouldn't we just treat it? And then he said, another infuriating thing, you're getting ahead of yourself. I felt like saying, how am I getting ahead of myself if you're bringing this up? If you're the one that's saying that you think it's a 50 to 60% chance of cancer. But I said, okay, well, in that case, what else could it be? Then he says it could be BPH, and I believe that's an enlarged prostate. I forgot what the technical definition of it is. Or it could be something called prostatitis, which is an infection of the prostate, normally a bacterial infection that can be treated with antibiotics. I was like, oh, okay, well, prostatitis, I've had that before when I was living in South Africa, took treatment for that. So can we talk about BPH? And he says, well, I think the best thing to do is for you to do this biopsy. I said, well, let me just be clear, I'm not doing a biopsy. So what else could we do? So to make a long story short, and I'll probably do a post about this very specific incident because there's lots of lessons I took away from it. But to make a long story short, I ended up convincing him that I should do an MRI since that was non-invasive and we could figure out if it was indeed prostate cancer. And then as I waited to do the MRI, I was talking to my cousin Miata, and she was kind enough to educate me that I could ask also for a liquid biopsy. And that would be a biopsy that didn't include any cutting and that procedure that he was recommending. So I did ask him about that, and he said, no, that won't really tell us what we need to know. So then Miata also suggested that there was a company called Prenovo, Pre and then NUVO, and they do a whole body scan since he was concerned that if it was prostate cancer, it may have metastasized or spread outside of the prostate. So she felt and really, by the way, shout out to Miata. I really appreciated her suggestion and prompting to do the Prenovo scan. She said, well, maybe medical aid. She said, most likely medical aid won't pay for it. I was like, I don't care. She said, it's expensive. Like, yeah, but it's something I need to know. So I did the Prenovo scan, and I ended up getting that result back before I got the results for the MRI, and it turned out that Prenovo detected no cancer, right? They detected some slight other things, but no cancer anywhere in my body. And so when the MRI came, the urologist told me, well, there was one, what is it called? One lesion that was found. And then they have something called a PIRAT score. And the PIRAT score was 3, which means it's indeterminate. They couldn't tell if it's cancerous or non-cancerous. So after going through this experience and doing a lot of research and educating myself, I realized that in terms of the time that I assume that I have left, I assume I have a lot of time left to do all these things that I really want to do, especially as it relates to this phase of my life that I'm dedicating to entrepreneurship, this phase of my life where I finally got to the stage where my fear was less than my faith. My faith was so much stronger than my fear that I could leave employment and leave a company that was paying really good salary, good package, great experience in terms of work, like Meta, to do my own thing and to dedicate myself to this purpose that I feel that I've been called on to fulfill. And then all of a sudden it was clear that maybe I don't have as much time as I think. And what I finally decided is it's a wake-up call to say, well, don't assume you have a lot of time. Assume you don't have a lot of time and get going, get these things going. So folks, this has been a very long update, but I wanted to just share with you all the different things that are happening. And also, since these 3 companies are now live and I'm working on building them, I expect to see a lot more from me about how each of those businesses are going. And thank you for spending time hearing me out. See you soon.